Hello, everybody, and welcome to another amazing panel brought to you by the OnCon Network. I've got some great guests with me today. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for tuning in. This is an exciting actual panel. We're going to be talking about from idea to print, how to actually create a comic book. How exciting is that? We're going to start off with introductions. We'll start with Luke Stone, just because he's right next to me on the top. We'll go to Dave.
Yep. Hey, my name is Luke Stone. I am the writer and the artist behind Hybrids and Sons of God. You can see some pictures right back there. I'm on Kickstarter right now, so make sure to check that out. We've got 3 days left and just shy of $2,000. We'd love your help on that. And you can find me at lukestonestudios.com or Google Luke Stone Studios, and you can find all of my pictures and stuff everywhere there.
Good. Hello. Oh, you want me to go?
Yeah, you're up, Dave.
My name is Dave Brown. I'm the creator of the Brown family back there, owner and creator of Supreme Universe Comics. That's all through me, and my future comics also being created through. The Brown families we've been through. We got 3 issues out right now. You can find me also at Dave the Supreme from Instagram, Facebook, any art streaming service that's even out there. Reach out.
All right. And of course, I am the underground indie advocating devil, and I'm here to entertain you and educate you all at the same time. As you guys can see, I have a lot of stuff behind me because I do a lot of different books, from fetish to monsters and more. We're going to be talking about the important process, and this is, I think, one of the most important panels that new creators actually go to. It's the process of creating a comic book. And before anything can begin, it always begins with an idea. Wouldn't you agree with that, gentlemen? It all starts with just
Totally.
So what do you do after you get the first idea? For each one of you, please tell me what you do, and then I'm going to give advice to the audience on some things that we may or may not cover. So I have a list of things. So we'll start with Dave this time. Dave, tell us, how does the process begin? You have that light bulb. Do you write it down, and how do you get it to, I guess, the art table? Because both of you are actually artists and writers. I'm the only. Well, technically, I have artist credits, but I'm really just a writer. You are both actually genuinely both. So, Dave, what happens? Because you don't have to consult an artist like I would have
to. Personally, I start with the idea, really, like with the Browns family. I want to do my own book. I was working on other people's, comics and stuff, but I said I want to work on something different. And I couldn't. I wanted to do a superhero thing, but then I was like, okay, that people are already doing that kind of stuff. So I said, I don't know how to really start it off really without being so cliche, pretty much from everything else. So I started really looking at my household pretty much, and I said, I guess I'll start with my own family. Start with what you know first, and that's how it really begun, really, for me. And I didn't start writing first because really I'm not much of a writer. I'm more of an artist. And then I just started drawing our characters out, fleshing them out more and more and more and more until I want to put them in the books now.
All right. And Luke?
Yeah, so this is by far one of my more favorite topics to talk about. First, I'll say that because more times than not, I talk with people that want to go from idea to book. How do you get a physical book in someone's hands? And so I love talking about this. And there is no shortchanging the concept aspect of it. And so when I have an idea, what I do is I write it down, and I start to do a lot of research. It goes into what I call R&D, or research and development. I start to find out, well, are people reading books like this? Is there anything on the subject matter that maybe I can learn about? And I start to develop and kind of try to figure out what a potential plot or story arc might be with that. And then I start, if I think that that there's a plot there that can be explored, and that there's an audience for that, then I'll start to develop some characters with that and write those down and start to get some ideas around it. But probably more than anything is I determine who my audience is going to be. And what is the purpose of the story? Is it just an idea, or is it going to try to develop into something? Is this going to be a short run mini comics? Is it going to be a graphic novel? Is it going to be a web comic? what is my purpose and who is my audience and how I'm going to work those things out. And is there anyone out there that's doing those things, that's into those things, that's reading in those markets, So, I mean, if I want to do a Western and my audience, and I'm not able to market to a Western audience, I need a lot of work to do that. So that's kind of my first process is, having the idea, write it down, and then work. And since I am the artist, typically I'll work with an editor or someone else or another couple of people to run those ideas by, just to make sure that I'm not missing anything or leaving anything on the table that could possibly be there creatively. Because sometimes it gets really difficult when you're kind of in like that little chamber of your own mind. You might get it perfectly well, but someone else may not really get the idea that you're trying to say. So I might think this is a great idea, and then somebody, Rob reads it and he's like, dude, this sucks. This is stupid. Don't waste your time. So I usually bounce once I've kind of done a little research and development and I have something that's more of a tangible idea, then I'll go ahead and I'll pass it on to some other people to give it a look.
All right, and I would definitely agree with both of you on that. Basically, it always starts with an idea. The idea for me becomes a short story. I write it out in prose, and then when I'm done writing it in prose, and you guys are going to see later this year, I'm actually releasing a book of prose that are all my ideas that I'm now polishing. I didn't even start. There are a couple new things that I'm putting in some sort of poetry. I don't really know if it's officially poetry, but it's just random thoughts from my mind. You guys all probably think I'm sicker than you realized when you read my book. And wow, I never thought Rob was that dark. He could be in DC Comics. And I'm hoping. But no, seriously, once I've got it written down, a lot of times I don't at this point, like Luke does, give it to anyone. So at this point, I sit down and I write my plan. And part of that plan is deciding whether or not I want to copyright it. Because a copyright, you should always copyright your work if you're going to be making it into a comic book. But here's my pause on it. If I'm not sure I want to develop it at this moment, I put it in a file and I leave it for later. And what I'm going to do now is, as I'm done with my novel, just my novel, I'll send that to be copyrighted. And every work with inside of it will be copyrighted. And I'll have an instant copyright for 30 different stories. So it's like, because I'll just put it up as an anthology and I suddenly own a copyright for all these amazing stories. It'll be great for me. So the other part of the plan is then I decide, well, is this marketable? Is this something that can be sold? What would be the cost of actually putting this together? And, is there an audience? And that's very hard to determine right away, because how do you know if something has an audience, right? So I try to first sit down and make the plan. So we're going to assume we're making a comic book today, so I'm green lighting it. We're just going to assume that. The plan, then I decide, how am I going to fund it? This isn't going to be a show about Kickstarter, but of course, that is an option, or are you going out of pocket? Either way, we're going with the concept that we've greenlit that. So now I'm making the book no matter what. So the plan would then be, well, I have to get a copyright for this. Now, before I go for a copyright, this is where I bring in Luke's point. I send it out to my friends. Before I apply for the copyright first, just to protect myself, because I've determined it. Then I send it out to my friends, let them give me some feedback, and I play with the story while seeking out an artist. And I begin to put my team together. I get the artist and the editor. Notice I'm saying I get the editor on right away. No art has been made. And I'm sending it out to the copyright without actually editing it. Why do I send it to that? Because all I need is the raw information. A lot of people make the mistake that they think they have to have a perfectly edited story for a copyright. That is not true. This is not supposed to be your most professional work. And actually, I'll be honest with you, sometimes leaving it more vague for a copyright helps you later because you can develop things. What I will say is have all your characters. Have all of your characters in that first story. And even if you don't use the character, they're now copyrighted. Like sometimes I'll add a side character I'm not sure I'll use. It might be in a second story, but I've already got the copyright for it. Do not mail it to you, email it to you. It's just easier and cheaper to actually copyright things. Yes, you can prove that you did it, but here's the difference between a copyright and actually not having a copyright. When someone says that you stole my work and you don't have a copyright, you have to get a lawyer and go to court. When someone says that you stole my work and you have a copyright, you hand them the copyright and they go to the judge and they try to convince the judge that your copyright doesn't hold up to what they have to say. And you don't have to get a lawyer until the judge says, well, I think we need to have a court case to see who determined this. And I'll be honest with you, from my research, 90% of people who start off that way without a copyright lose. It's very hard. And the other 10%, usually you done stole some. Usually it is because you done took it
Right.
somewhere. So once you have your plan, so how do you guys make your plans out? Because I've just told you how I make my plan. I put my team in place. I get the editor, and I figure out how I'm going to fund it. How do you guys make that plan to take the next step? You've got your story outline at this point, so that should be part of your plan. You have the outline of the story. What's the next step? Do you get the editor before you go to scripting? Do you script and then go to the editor? Do you hire your artist? Like, how do you guys determine it? Because I do that all at once. Because I have ADHD, everything has to happen immediately. Dave's worked with me. He knows what I mean. I'm like, I have a story. Let's do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Who I am. Let's do this. Like, I got no pause. I'm like, I got an editor already. And Dave's like, what? I was like, yeah, I already got an editor. We're good. But
okay, all right.
What about you, Dave? How do you make it happen?
I do. I think I work I work different from a lot of people that's in the industry. Me going to different cons and listening to stories about how they create their comic books. Excuse me, I'm sorry. How people go through their whole thing. I know everybody do something different. I work so different is that it's like I work like backwards. I draw my characters. I draw like an outline to see exactly what's finna happen. Wow, I'm really disturbed right now. I draw out my characters first. I just do little thumbtacks pretty much on see how everything, because I see everything like almost like a production of a movie really. And then I fill out pretty much what my story is on my production, pretty much on what everything is laid out really. And after I've done that, I actually give it over to my wife to look over. And she looks over everything. And pretty much right there, I might go to, like my dad or somebody like that, and let other people close to me really read it. And then actually I go straight to the printer really. I mean, other than, obviously the beginning part, like getting copyrights and stuff like that, it's like, that's a pretty much given right there. But I go straight to the printer, print stuff out, and then I start really handing out to, people to read.
Okay. And that makes
I'm really kind of like amateur to it because like that was in the beginning really. Nowadays I'm just a little bit more different when I do stuff, because now that I learned how it went in the beginning and see how everything played out, I was like, oh, okay, now I gotta start changing up and listen to people, going to different cons, listen to people. It's like I've taken a lot of information and education and listen to podcasts like this. It helps out a lot.
Yes, absolutely. And it's it's funny because I'm a writer, you're an artist. We tackle it the different ways that our skill level is the strongest, I think. And you're always going to hear that difference. Now, Luke, you're both, so I am curious to how you, because I figured Dave would kind of go the artist route. I knew I was going to go the writer route. And I know I do the same things he does, where you make your storyboards, but I write the story first, obviously, because I want to fall in love with the character. And as a writer, sometimes we put stuff in that you'll never read as a fan of us, but we know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I make it a policy to never do anything that's going to be a waste of my time. So I always take that and the only bad idea is the idea that you stick with just because you feel like you have to stick with it. I'm not married to anything that I do. Everything can be made better. My idea is not the only good idea. I've kind of learned all of those things, So part of my research and development, as you heard when I mentioned that before, part of that process is giving the idea to an editor or a project manager to say, hey, does this idea sound like it's going to sell? Does it have potential? And if it does, then I start to actually develop into more of a concrete story. I will say for the listeners that the copyright and the trademark are two different things. So keep in mind, you can copyright the story, but you have to trademark the logos and the names and things like that. And that can get expensive. Honestly, for two different. a cheap workaround for that is to post a character design with the name of it online and like, hey, I made this character. And in many cases that serves because it's timestamp on it, and a time and date. And so that can serve to protect your character until you get the trademarks back, because sometimes those can take a little while to get back in, and they're relatively expensive when you start to really add those things up. So just kind of as a kind of pre-warning for that. But no, I get the editor involved pretty well right away, or at least, a publisher or somebody that's going to have another look at it, because before I really start to develop it, I need to have a plan on where I'm going to go. Now, part of that plan, part of that development is I start drawing characters. I start doing different ideas and, do different landscapes and try to say, hey, this is what the world's going to look like. And then I work out the script. And then the script is pretty fun. I actually like it quite a bit. That part, it's I get real detailed because I do sometimes work with another artist to do layouts to speed up, because I do like 3 or 4 books at a time sometimes. So I'll work with another artist that can just do my thumbnail layouts and stuff. And but yeah, so that's kind of my approach to it. I kind of approach it probably more like a writer, but with the idea of like, this is a whole big project. If I'm going to spend time doing it, I'm going to make sure that it's good before I waste my time doing it. Kind of,
And we're being joined by the one, the only Randy Zimmerman, and he knows.
Randy.
Thank goodness.
He knows the topic we're talking about, and you're joining us just at the beginning, so we're not too far in.
Cool.
We've just gone over the basic idea and planning stage of a book. So how do you do it? Because you're a writer and artist too. I have an amazing panel today because I have some very talented people here. And please introduce yourself too.
I'm Randy Zimmerman. I've been doing alternative and independent comics for many decades. Arrow Comics, Caliber Comics, Antarctic Comics, Weeby Comics, Massive Comics. I've done literally everything in this business. Not from every company, but I've done a lot of freelance work. And self-published quite a bit. Spent 10 years putting together a comics newspaper. The last 10 years called Flint Comics and Entertainment, which I had a copy of down here. That we gave away for free at the comic shops. I think there's a copy of it. Let me reach for it. Yeah, right there. Right there. Promised I'd keep some copies handy. It's like a little newspaper. We gave it. It was advertiser supported. We gave it away for free. But what I like, and I keep, are spiral notebooks. Used to be able to get these. You can still pick these up, 16, 19 cents a piece, like from any of the box stores, Target, Myers, or whatever. You buy them in big packs, and I've got a stack of them, and every book has a different project on it. So I've got about 5 of these floating around, and I sit there and I start making notes, fill pages, and then when I write, depending upon if I'm writing for somebody else or if I'm writing for me, I'll usually break it down. Let me show you a more esoteric page here instead of the opening page. I usually break it down into really rough thumbnails with notes, whatever dialogue I need along the side, and then flesh it out from there. That's after the rough outline, so that I know just about what's happening on every page.
And I like the fact that you actually have spiral notebooks. I kind of go back and forth because my handwriting since my back injury has gotten so bad that I twitch in my hand. So I can't write like the way I used to. So I do have to actually type, or I can't read my own handwriting some days. Yeah. And it was never great to begin with. All right, so we're
if I'm writing a project, then I'll write it out like a full script, depending upon who I'm working with.
So when do you get the editor involved, Randy? I am curious about that. When do you bring on an editor? We talked about that already.
Well, when I'm doing my own stuff, I'm usually the idea of editing usually consists of my wife checking for spelling.
And some people do that, and there's nothing wrong, honestly. Yeah. If you have someone who can handle it and not make mistakes, that's still an editor. I tell that to people all the time.
She catches all of my misspellings.
Yeah, so. There are some very professional people who can do a very. You want to laugh? My 11-year-old nephew at the time was able to catch mistakes editors had missed in my book, and I had an editor go through it. So sometimes your qualifications don't matter as much as your for lack of a better term, your analness with grammar and being able to see all the mistakes and
I'll many times add an editor and a proofer just for that reason. So I'll have an editor look at it and then another proofer look over it right before it goes to print.
The last time I had an editor, I ran it just like a movie. I sent them a treatment, a rough outline of how the episode is going to go. And then if there was a problem with it, or a plot point that needed to be addressed, we would talk about it at that point. But most of the time they just said, yeah, go ahead. And then I typed it out as a full script, including dialogue. And once that was done, I was done with it. It went right to the artist, and then I didn't see it again until it come back in completed form.
Now, that's an interesting actual point you make, Randy, and I'm going to ask you guys, and we'll start with Luke on this one. What is your script format, and does who you're working with matter? For example, I don't write a script. I write prose first, as we had talked about in the beginning. I don't convert it to script until I talk to the artist, because sometimes I don't know what the artist wants, and there are different scripts that do things a different way. There's the Marvel way, which gives the artist a lot of control and a lot of ways to do it. And then there is the, I'm going to give you a blueprint. You're going to follow everything I say. And one thing you were saying about trademark, because we brought Randy and I didn't get to say this. Yes, trademarks are important, but copyrights can help you actually keep a trademark even in file for it if you describe how the character looks. That's why in those original scripts, always describe what your character looks like. It's not as good as a trademark, but it at least gives you a fighting chance in court when you have a problem. So that's why I said in the what you give to the Library of Congress doesn't have to be fully edited, but it has to be fully formed. You have to have a full idea and you have to describe things. But Luke, what do you think? How do we handle that?
Well, I did, before I started writing, I did a lot of work for other people, and I still do, and so I see a lot of scripts. And I've worked with people that gave me a lot of freedom, and then I've worked with people that gave me no freedom at all. They say, I want it exactly like this. And so in those cases, from the artist standpoint, if it's a really, either way, what I'll do is I'll do a thumbnail layout of the whole book. So I won't draw really anything, but I'll sketch like camera angles and stuff like that, and how I would want it based off of the script, and then I'll give that to somebody, and then I'll give that to the writer so that they can approve it, and then we can move forward from there. But as I'm writing, what I like to do is I actually go in and I use a program called Superscript, because it breaks down all the weird stuff for me and can output it in a bunch of different formats. But I'll go in and describe in great detail the scene that's going to take place over the course of the next couple pages, and give all the details that I can. I don't hold any spoilers back from an artist that's working with me, or a colorist, or a letterer. I want them and I need them to know the story as well as I do, so they can understand the little subtleties and the nuances that need to be put into the art and into the colors and into the lettering and stuff like that if I'm using all those people. And so I will give a detailed thing, and then I will go into this is what the panel needs to have in it, and then I'll do the text and dialogue and stuff like that. And then I will if I'm using a layout artist, I will let them kind of explore that a little bit and do it. But typically, if I work with a layout artist, they're doing the thumbnails and then they hand it off to me. And if I like it, I'll stick with kind of their rough pencil. If I don't like it, I change it and I do a different view altogether for that panel. Sometimes I've changed entire pages because I was like, it's just not working for me. But that's all part of it, kind of that creative process. But being the writer, I'm not really limited to what my artists can do. I'm more limited to my own abilities than I am somebody else's. So, which is a constant struggle.
Yeah, I understand that. And Dave, how do you like a script as an artist? Because I know when you're writing for yourself, it's always different, right, Randy and Luke? When you're your own artist, you make your own type of script for yourself. Mm-hmm. But when you're being passed a script, what do you want passed to you, Dave? How much freedom do you like, and how much, hey, give me as much information where's your lines with working with someone else?
Give me as much as possible. That's how I really like mine. I like how I've been given, stories wrote into it's almost done like a script pretty much. And, it tells me the whole layout pretty much okay, this is where they at. This is how this looks. It has a futuristic kind of feel to it. And it's okay, give me that kind of information. It gives me I like to go on, you know, pretty much, yeah. I like just give me as much information as possible as an artist.
Now, Randy, you're actually an award-winning commercial artist as well. So you get beyond scripts, you get people coming up with you just concepts, right? And said, "This is what I want."
Yeah.
What do you prefer as someone who's working as an artist? What would, if you had the choice, what would you want them to really do for you?
If I was, it's been a long time since I've actually worked with an outside writer.
Oh,
Most of the time, they'll contact me and say, "We have an idea for an ad," and I'll pound it out, rough it out, very similar to what I showed you. I'll probably more detailed than this because this is just scribbles here, but I can understand this. If I was working for a client, let me see here, and I keep a separate book for the Zim graphics material. That's my company. Let me see if I can actually find a job here I can show you. Shirt layout. Most of the time it's just notes, sign notes. This is that big. This is this big. This needs to fit within that field. Well, I can use this for an example. I'm doing a series of trail signs now for a local nature preserve. Actually, it's kind of stalled because of the situation now. But no, here I can show you this. Here's the cover that we wrote, that we agreed upon together. I roughed it out with the dialogue right in front of them, and then they approved it. And that turned into let's get that right. That turned into this.
oh, look at that.
Wow.
But they knew I've worked with these folks for like 5-6 years. So when I sketched that out, I did it right in front of them. Just here's what it's going to look like. What do you think of this? Oh, that's great. Go ahead and do that. And then I'll work this out as full as possible in black and white and show it to them. And then I went through and did it in color. Let me hold that back a little bit.
That's really cool. I really like that, actually.
And it turned out really good.
It really did. So you would say that you need a relationship helps, in other words. And I think that's just the basic.
Well, any type of client, worker-client relationship, a relationship does help. It gets a little rough sometimes, depending upon how friendly you become, because there have been times that I've been working like that where I've had to pull back a little bit and remind myself, I'm the client, or I'm the worker, they're the client, and the customer is always right. So it doesn't matter what I want to do or what I think is going to look cool. I can just pitch to them and I say, I think this will look cool, and then they have to decide on their own whether or not that's what they're going to go with, because in the end, they're the ones that sign the check.
Luke, did you have something to add?
Oh, I was just gonna, I was just gonna kind of echo that. There's definitely two types of work. There's collaboration, and then there's work for hire. When it comes to work for hire, tell me exactly what you want. I'm not here to tell I'm here to help you tell your story. I'm not here to tell it for you.
Right.
If it's a collaboration, like I'm working with something right now with Travis Gibb that's going to be released with Starcross Comics, and pretty excited about it. But he gave me the script. I read the script, and then we had a phone call conversation. It's like, hey, I'm thinking this is how I'm going to draw this. This is what we need to, this is what I'm thinking for, the characters, and, how can we develop the character this way? Because then the conversation becomes a lot different when you're a collaborator than when you're a work for hire. And so it kind of depends. If you've got that idea and you're trying to take the idea to a comic, are you looking for someone to do exactly what you want? Or are you looking for a collaborator that's going to have some kind of input on the creative process? And so that's kind of it's a big difference between the two.
And I listen, as a writer, I don't want to step on artists' toes. Obviously, if I want to team up with you, I appreciate your style. I've teamed up with some people, and it all depends, again, what Randy was saying, your relationship. There are people who I want to work with. And with Dave even, I wanted to work with him. And I remember telling Dave, what do you think? Because I liked his style, and I wanted his feedback. I wanted him to feel part of the process. But then I've worked with people who are brand new artists, and I knew if I gave them too much control, we were going to go off the rails. they weren't going to know how to do it. And I knew I'd have to step in and be part of the process and be like, no, you have to turn the character this way. Because I also, like a lot of writers should do, study cinematography, which means angles of cameras, understanding the layouts, understanding what you want to have in your thing. And if you're a writer, I'll say this right now, you better be doing your homework. Cinematography is so important to comic books. Yeah. Understand. You can't be like, well, I'm not the artist, I don't understand. That's a bad collaborative partner. That is someone who can't talk about angles and can't express what you want. And they're just going to get frustrated by you and have to redo it and redo it and redo it. And I
agree. Yeah. So our three of us here are concerned. That's an easy connection because we have the story here and we're drawing it, you know, like especially when Dave, he can go straight to storyboarding, straight to the art because he's got it here. He doesn't need to have that crazy script in the middle because he's got it. What's the point of that, right? So I mean, you know, it's like skipping from a scribble to an ink. If you don't need the pencil, go straight to the final drawing if you can do that. But in many cases, an artist is trying to capture the vision that you have, Rob. And so the only way that we can do that is if you give us a really clearly communicated vision of what you want to see. Otherwise, it's redraw after redraw after redraw, and it's just time-consuming, exhausting, and expensive to do that.
And I'll tell you, I've worked with artists at this point. I'm getting some books that are going to be theirs, and they love working with me because I ask questions. I like to have a one-on-one. Earlier in my career, I went through Messenger. Now I actually like talking to people. I'll even go into a StreamYard privately, and it'll just be me and you seeing each other's energy, hearing what's important. Because I also think when you're talking to someone, you can hear, no, wait, he wants this part. This is important to him. This is something he's going to put his foot down. As opposed to, oh, he doesn't really care about this. Well, I can make a suggestion and throw something out there and we can change it. Yeah. And you get to build a relationship. And this is a relationship. You're giving birth to a story and you want it to be the best it can be. So I suggest always having some sort of communicative conversation that is human. Eyes to eyes, smiles, being able to really, even if it's a phone call, like Luke said, phone calls matter because you go back and forth and you get a feel for each other. And you get to kind of do things. And I'm doing a story right now, and I didn't get her to actually get on a phone with me and do one of these hangouts, and we've had some problems. And it went back to me not giving her a bigger script, and I realized, okay, she needs a bigger script. So now every time I talk to her, I give her a lot of information, and it's like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Because I even gave her some, like, drawing sketches, but, you know, confusion happens. And I stress this, when you're working with someone new, you have to get in a rhythm. And when you get into a rhythm, you work better later. That's why when you see issue number 1, there's a lot of like kind of goofy mistakes. In issue 10 seems like symmetry. And that's why they bring back people who've worked together in Marvel and DC. They'll hire both of them to go work at Marvel because they worked really well. Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, I think I'm saying that wrong. They always get brought in. Thank you. They always get brought to work together because they do such wonderful things together. So you want to have that symmetry. And if you don't have it, thank you. They always get brought to. I don't know what that was. It sounded like me.
It was you. I'm sorry. That was my fault.
It's okay. I don't know with the internet these days. It's a relationship. Treat it like that, and don't treat someone like an employee. I don't care if you're paying them work for hire. They're still a human being, and they're putting their passion. We're creators. We're passionate. Don't treat them like they're just your prod. They're just doing it because you're telling them because you have money. You do that, they're going to give you shitty work. I'm sorry, it's just true. Same thing like me. I've worked with people who hired me to write something. And I was like, okay. They had some nasty comments about certain things. They were like, I just want this. I wrote it, and it never will be. It'll never see the light of day because they didn't listen to me, and it was problematic. And the editor who came on was like, this is a horrible story. Like, and they even asked me, like, you wrote this? And I was like, no, they wrote it. I just put it together. And that happens because you get frustrated and you're like, I'm out. You know, and you do what you have to do. You finish what you said you're going to finish, and your heart's not in it. And I wouldn't even tell you where that story is, and I don't care if they make it without me. It's horrible because I wasn't listened to. So that's important. It's a relationship. Now, I know a lot of people ask about rates. We're not going to get into rates today. This is the concept that you're going to find artists. But I will bring up the topic, how do you find an artist? For me, DeviantArt, Facebook has been good. Meeting people in person have all been avenues to do that. Now, I'm a writer, so I'm going to twist it and put it onto you guys. How do you guys find writers as well? So we'll start off with Randy.
That's one of the advantages of doing the paper. If you notice, we did a Made in Michigan issue and did that a lot. I was able to find a lot of talent locally that way, and that local touch is very important, because the last collaboration I did, I wonder if was with Josh Harris, who's been on our program a couple times. He's gone on. He's become a madman as far as doing a ton of work. Give me just a second here. Yeah. The last work that we did was on a property called Paragon, that we ran comic
You
pages.
put that in the main
paper. Pardon?
I said, let me
Oh,
pull
in the
you up.
mainframe?
Yeah.
We did a comic called Paragon, which was a kind of a superpowered superhero being running around on their first day doing good deeds for everybody.
Oh, cool.
That was a lot of fun to do. And the way I worked with Josh on that, I stumbled across him, his work, and then I said, hey, we should do something together. I have an idea that I really want to get done. We're gonna collect that together, knock on wood, here pretty soon, and put that out as a story, because we serialized it 3 parts through the paper at about 8 pages a hit, and it's a nice little tight day in the life of type story of a character basically with the power of Superman, the very early Superman, and it's a lot of fun to do. But my point is that we would meet at a Coney Island. It's like a family restaurant, Greasy Spoon, and we'd sit there and work it out. Josh had never done a whole lot of comic pages before, and it was almost like a mentor teaching student type of thing. We'd sit there with the papers, with the notebook, spiral notebook, lay it all out. This panel he's doing this, then you're going to want to move the composition this way, and we're going to show that. And he ran his input in on that as well, and then he turned out pages that I then went through and lettered. So, but that personal communication, like you were saying, is really key, and being able to get along with your collaborator is essential. So, or else you're just going to keep running in circles, and then nobody has a good time, and it just turns into a bad experience.
And there's nothing worse than being halfway through a project with someone you're not getting along with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now pulling teeth to get to the end of it. And now you don't know if you'll make a second issue, because you might just walk away and be like, no, never again am I working with this person. So what about you, Dave? How do you even need a writer at this point? You're writing your own stuff. You're doing your own art. Are you looking for people? Because, I mean, you have to be bringing on letterers, or do you do your own lettering?
My own lettering. I do my own lettering. I don't need nobody right now, but I've worked with other people. Like a lot of writers come to me through Facebook, Instagram, all the main social networks and stuff like that. Other than that, no, I do my own.
Luke Stone?
If I'm looking for a writer, I tend to look for someone that actually reads comic books. They need to understand the medium. I've worked with people that are screenwriters that want to make a comic book, and the reason why they're trying to make a comic book is because they really ultimately just want to make a movie and sell a screenplay or something like that, and they have no idea how to approach comic books. I've worked with a couple novelists that want to make a comic book, and most of them don't understand the visual aspect of comic books either. And so if I'm looking for a writer, it needs to be someone that understands comic books, they read a lot of comic books, and they have fun ideas. Because with a good editor, a inexperienced writer with a good editor but that has great ideas could be a really good writer, because they can learn the nuts and bolts, so to speak. So I have a tendency to, that's what I look for. Now I like to have as many people's name on the book as I can get, even though I can do all the aspects of it. I just feel like it's better to have more collaborators. It takes some pressure off of me for the creative aspect of things, to be able to have more people on that book that have a really good vision for things. And when it comes time to sell it, they can share that Kickstarter or share that website store link as much as you can. So that's nice too.
All right. So just to recap real quick, and then we're going to see if we have any questions or any other comments, because we've basically taken you through the process. So here's the process that we've outlined today. First, you start with an idea. Then you write down a short story, you get your outline, and you start your plan. Remember, the plan is where you start bringing your team together. Well, you need a editor. Who's going to be your editor? Who's going to be your artist? Who's going to be the writer? This is where you put that out. And you also make a plan for your budget. Budgeting in itself is a whole show, to be honest with you guys. We might actually do an actual panel just about how to budget your comic book properly and then how to crowdfund it. Those two together are a great panel itself. But that's your time. Once you have that together and you have your team together, you go to get your artist and you begin to have art. Now, here's an important question for you guys about making a book. For your first book working with someone, do you guys just sign on for a first issue? And how many pages do you want to work with someone for the first time? Because I know a lot of people have said that they hated committing to long stories with people for the first time because it's nerve-wracking to sign up to do 10 issues with 1,000 pages. So what do you think, Randy? Is that like uphill in the wrong way? You know, ice skates and ice, you know, trying to go uphill, trying to sign on for too long of a dive?
Well, folks starting projects the first time out, I found there's always a small problem in the fact that they want to do the grand epic. Mm-hmm. Here, I've got an idea for a 100-issue series that stars this main star who has this big, broad arc and all of this stuff happens, and I've already got it put together. All I need is an artist. Your best bet is to start, especially when you're working with somebody you've never worked with before, start incredibly small. I mean, you're going to want to talk to this person about character design and bring them in on it so that it has their own unique look. You're going to want to know that artist's strengths, just like that artist wants to know your writing strengths or the points that you're really trying to drive home in your story. So I would suggest character drawings when you're bringing an artist in on the ground floor, then a short story. Even if it's about your long-running epic, you can tie that down, an incident or a good arc story that fits inside of that, where you go, well, let's do 8 pages, let's do 12 pages, see how it runs, let's get this done. And then not only do you get to know your artist better, but it gives you a preview for that work, for that property, for that IP that you want to run with in order to give a short clip to people to get to know, especially if you have a super long-running epic story. You know, you're going to want to give people a smaller taste other than to go, here's, you know, the first 10 pages of my 1,000-page epic.
What do you think, Dave?
Sorry, I've been doing some
You're good.
interruptions here. I'm sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
For a collaborative partnership, when you're working with someone, do you want to step into the deep end of the pool and sign up to do 10 issues, like Randy's saying, the big mosaic story arc that goes on for 1,000 years and the different battles, or would you rather just take something slow, sign up to do 1 issue, and see how you feel after it?
No, I agree with Randy on that because I like to do something nice and slow because I gotta get the feel of like what's gonna be done, you know, with this story. And on top of that, you know, I don't know, sometimes I would feel like I gotta have some enjoyment with the story itself. You know, it's like, you know, I don't want to be doing 100 issues or something that I have no interest in whatsoever. Mm-hmm. I feel like my art not going all into it, you know?
Yeah.
That's just how I feel. I mean, I know a lot of people say they do it, you know, like, well, it's a check. I'm sure I'm going to get paid for doing it. But I guess I just feel different. It's like I got to have the passion for it, you know? So it's I feel like it's going to show in my work. Like, you know, I do the first issue, it's going to look good. Second issue is like, okay. Third issue is like, all right. But by the 10th issue, I'm like, I might get kind of bored with this now. So.
And Luke?
Yeah, I don't like to work on. I'll just piggyback on something that Randy said. He's absolutely right. Too many people come out with like these big grandiose ideas. The smaller, the better. There are so many anthologies and different like collective group like books that you can get yourself into. Do short stories. To find out like there's this guy named Bill Rock who does some books with Starcross. And one of the things he does is he has a bunch of zero issues. So all of these little mini stories of a character's background or something. So he writes a whole bunch of these, and then what he does is he hires out artists and colorists, and he tries out a bunch of different teams. And then he finally found the artist he wanted for his #1 issue, and so he's got him working on his #1. He's found the colorist he wants for that, and so that tends to be the process to try to find that out. As an artist, I will never sign up for a huge graphic novel. I don't want to do more than a few pages or 20 pages at a time with people. In fact, the book I was working on before, Hybrids, which is on Kickstarter right now for the next 3 days, about $77 away from hitting my next stretch goal. Before I started working on that, I was actually working on another book that was supposed to be a 12-issue arc, and we finished 2 issues, and then we realized that it wasn't selling, and it was selling pretty good for a minute, but we're having a hard time really getting traction. And Hybrids was actually the book that I was not paying attention to. The first issue was kind of clunky. It was my first time writing and things like that, but it's the one that people were interested in. So it's just one of those things where, if you start to try to commit to something that's too long and too deep, you're going to feel like it goes back to my very first statement about the concept, the kind of research and development. If it's, there's no point in spending a whole lot of effort on something that's not going to work. And too many times we will make a bad choice, but then we will continue to make that bad choice by pushing it. And I think if you sign on to a long relationship with an artist, a writer, a colorist, even a letterer, what you're doing is you're tying yourself into that relationship. I like to do small little contracts. Like I have a colorist for issues 1 through 5 of Hybrids. It's the same colorist. Now when I come out with the next 5 issues, we're gonna look at maybe he's not the colorist anymore. I like him. He's really good, but can I afford his rates? Does he still want to do it? Do I? So I think just take it in chunks. Definitely take it in chunks.
And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a tip here. We'll call it an indie tip or an underground tip. When you want to work with a new artist, sign up to do an anthology with them before you sign them up for a full issue. Go do a short story, a 4 to 5 page book. So you guys work together. I'm working with someone right now and I want to move on to doing an issue with them, but I wanted to get all the awkward stuff out of the way on the anthology. See if there's a relationship before I jump into a full series with them, because I don't want that awkwardness, and we're learning to talk to each other. And that it sounds awkward, but every artist is a little different. Every writer is a little different. It's a relationship, guys. If you don't respect the fact this is a relationship, you're going to have trouble with people. And that's where, let me tell you, when you're cool with someone and something does come up, they're going to be like, oh, he's always been good to me, or she's always been good to me. And they're going to listen to your side, and they're going to go, okay, you know what? It's not a big deal. I'm good with it. But if you're a prick with every little thing, the minute something goes wrong, they're not going to be open-minded to it. They're going to be like, no, I did what I had to do. That's your fault. You fix it. I don't care. I did everything I ever had to do with you. I don't want you to call me again. Thank you. You don't want that. We are getting to the 1 hour mark. So did anyone have to jump off at the 1 hour mark? Because there is some comments and I do want to take some stuff. Nope. Okay. Very good. One thing we didn't mention, and I did leave it to the end on purpose, is deadlines. Deadlines are tricky, and I think a lot of people get into trouble this way. First, there are the people who are the deadline Nazis, for lack of a better term. They decide in the beginning of their book, well, I got to get this comic book out in 6 months, no matter what, hell or high water. They make this grandiose goal without having an artist in place, without having a letterer in place, a colorist in place, not knowing what anyone's schedules are like. These are the type of decisions that can be dangerous. You can have an idea of what you want, but I stress to you right now, in the beginning of your project, deadlines have to be fluid. You have to first understand what everyone on your team can do. I have to delay books sometimes because of just that. Someone's busy finishing a project. And I tell everyone else involved, well, will you be free in August? And we have to make that commitment that we meet back up in August to do the project. This is a normal part of indie comics or underground comics. So when it comes to deadlines, I want to ask all you guys, how important are deadlines? I know Randy just lives by deadlines and he stresses himself out. But for Dave, when you're working with yourself, how do you manage giving out deadlines to yourself and making sure that you're following them?
I have a wife. She keeps everything scheduled out pretty much, especially because she's also the person who schedules out all cons. So when I feel like, okay, you got this comic book coming out here, you need to have this book done by this time. And I was working on a new comic book actually, Urban Tales, which is done technically, but I had it done for the next con, which was Wizard World, but then got canceled. So like, okay, so now I'm just sitting on books pretty much, so when cons got canceled and stuff like that, so I'm just so I'm like,
what are you gonna do?
Pretty much. What you gonna do, right? So it's cool. So I just move on to the next thing, and that's where she come into play. What you working on next? Okay, you gotta have it done by June. You got to here. Like, so she keeps me definitely on point.
And how do you? I know Randy has had some of that during some of. He's been like, I have to get this done, or I'm getting murdered in my sleep. How do you deal with that, Randy? I know you put a lot of pressure on yourself to never be late.
I'm working on stuff now.
Yeah, he's
anyway.
He's still
Deadlines are essential. Yep, even small deadlines, especially if you're working on your own material. You got to have those hurdles, those goalposts that you need to get to. Because for me, especially if I have an open deadline, and I'll tell this to my customers, especially my commercial customers. Oh, get it to me when you have it done. That doesn't work for me. It needs to be done. Tell me what date it needs to be done by, and it'll be done. Because usually 2 or 3 days before that deadline is when I'll sit there and start doing your stuff. If they need it in 2 days, oh, I'm on it right away, and boom, 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 it's done, and here you have it. But if it's 2 months, it might sit there for quite a while I'm working on other stuff that has to be done in 2 days. But pardon me, as a independent creator, as an alternative creator, little goalposts are always important to me, especially essential. You need to have the script done by such date. We need to start looking at doing the art by such date. You need to be on page 6 by this date, or you need to have 6 pages turned in, depending upon how your artist works. In order just to keep everything chugging along at a decent pace.
And Brian K. Morris from the chat room says, deadlines are essential. Pressure makes diamonds. No, they make ulcers. I've seen Randy stressed. I've been stressed.
I don't have ulcers, but I'm also doing stuff that I love. So
that's true. And
fun.
Deadlines, I think deadlines keep me in line, especially with the ADHD. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm like squirrel and I'm running over there. So I need to know that something is done. I need it to haunt me, and I need it to be something I have to get done because I'm paranoid I'm not going to get it done. And if I don't get it done, something bad's going to happen. So those keep me going. What about you, Luke? Because you also work with Star Comics, which is a publisher, so you get involved in the back scene. I mean, I'm sure you get your hand to your head very often because you get bad excuses why people can't get work done.
You see this up here? This is from rubbing it. That's not like that. The hair's going because of the no deadlines. I agree are very important. So yeah, I work as the project manager at Starcross. So like right now we're working on a project that's going to be a team up with the Advocator, and so. I'm getting everyone's scripts going, I'm kind of running that project. Hey guys, come on, let's get our stuff so that we can pass it on over here and do that kind of stuff. But we try to work out when a Kickstarter is going to run, so that we're overlapping, but not at the same time. We want to make sure that nobody else is running their last 7 days or their first 7 days of a Kickstarter overlap somebody else's first or last 7 days. So we want everybody to have like 7 days at the beginning and 7 days at the end where everyone is just like pushing their stuff. So you have to schedule that stuff out, and you have to mark it on the calendar. You have to work with deadlines. I work full-time outside of comic books. It's not my full-time job. It is kind of a full-time job right now, but it's not my full. So in order to get books done, man, I got to work on a deadline. And I'm like with Randy, absolutely. I do work for the people. I'm like, when you want it done? They're like, it's no hurry. I'm like, okay, then I'm not, if something else is going to squeeze in there because something else is in a hurry, and So yeah, I definitely have to have deadlines. Now I'm lenient with people on deadlines because I know that a lot of people don't do this full time, especially in indie comics. You might have an artist, a colorer, or a letterer that's working with you on your project that they have other things happen. I had a flatter that was supposed to get me a couple of things in. Usually it takes a day to get a couple pages to me. Had a problem at a hospital with a loved one, and so they had to go deal with that. And I'm like, hey, that's fine. This is quick. I can push this on to the next day. I just have to have it out by this day for print or whatever. So it was, so you got to be lenient. I mean, we're people, you're working with people, and relationships are always, like, we go back to what Randy said, relationships are always more important than the work that you're actually producing, because the work you're producing won't be any good if you have bad relationships with people. So
yep.
Very true.
Very true. Very true. All right, so we're going to hit the comments now. So there's some questions that people need to know. So we're going to give them that information best we can. Meredith says, Hi, gang. I lost electricity for a bit, so I don't know what I missed. Nothing much. Randy wasn't here yet. And Dave and us and me and Luke were just warming up. So you got here just at the right time, Meredith. Meredith said, so I've got stories but no idea where to go from there, which is why I've never tried. And that's an important thing. People get intimidated by failure or perceived failure. And I'm going to say this, and you guys chime in on this. The only failure is not doing something. Not doing it is the ultimate failure, because with not doing it, you get nothing. Even when you screw up with doing something, you get something from the experience, and that's experience. You learn something. Even if it failed horribly and was a car crash, you had experience from it. What do you guys think about that?
So do you guys ever watch that old show Mythbusters? You ever see that? There was this thing they used to say, failure is always an option. And I think that what we do in our life is we think that failure is never an option. But failure is always an option. And you can actually learn more from the failures than you do than the successes. Look at Thomas Edison, the light bulb. And so the first step is to just do it. Like what's his face in that video he did? Just do it. That guy. Shia LaBeouf, yeah. so just do it. If you want to, it's like, okay, well, I have a story, I have an idea, then find somebody that writes a comic book script and say, hey, how do I write a comic book script? What does yours look like? Can I look at one of yours? Can I, look at 3 or 4 different people's comic book scripts, find out what they're using, what they're doing, say, okay, well, how can I turn this into a comic book then? Is there any tips that you've got about writing a comic book script? Then let's do that. And then find an artist that's wanting to work with it. Like, okay, so how would you draw this? Is this something that you'd be interested in doing? And then just do it. Once you get, just do it. It may not, I guarantee you your first comic is not going to be good. It's not. It's just get over that now. Just realize that your first comic is just like you just get it out of the way. It's like you just get it over with, because it's not going to be good. You're going to, have a good time with it. My first comic was not good. Yeah, heck, my fifth and sixth comic wasn't good.
Dave Sim, the creator of Cerebus, who ran for 300 issues, probably long before most of us even got into comics. Always had an old adage that every creator, no exceptions, has 2,000 lousy pages in them. They're the most worst thing that you've ever seen or ever done in your entire life, and there's around 2,000. Now, after you do 2,000, you get them out there, and you have to do them, finish them, get them out there, and take a look at it and be able to, in your mind, dissect that work. Don't be afraid. Every artist should go back and look at their stuff. I know I do it all the time. You go back and look at stuff from a year ago, 6 years ago. Well, for me, 12 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But anyway, you look at that and you dissect it. That's how you learn. That's how you stay being an artist. It's by looking at your own stuff. But in order to do that, you always have to take that first step. Like everybody's saying, you got to get something done. You got to do it. Short stories are awesome. Anthology books are incredible to help you get that done. Mini comics, being able to do an ash can, if you know what those are, 8.5 by 11, folded in half, stapled on the spine. Just to have something to give away or show at shows, or to sell at shows. I'm not saying give it away, but in order to have something to sell at shows, if you know Matt Fizzell, he does mini comics where he takes that 8.5 by 11, folds it again, puts one staple on the spine, and then sells it for $1 out there at conventions, in order to get that, to hit that goal, to be able to get that, because there's so much psychological approval that clicks in your head when you've done 1 book, 2 books, 5 books, 6 books, and eventually you'll hit that 2,000 mark probably faster than you'll ever realize, especially if you decide that this is what you want to do in this, that you want to stay in this industry. Those 2,000 pages will go by really quick, and then suddenly what you will stop one day and you're reading your old stuff and you go, oh, that worked pretty good. Did I write that? Holy crap, that's really good, you know. And it'll happen. You just have to do it and keep doing it and keep putting it out there in front of people and learn. That's the mistakes thing. You're really not doing mistakes. You're doing a work. You're doing a piece of art that as soon as it's out there, as soon as it's printed, you know you can do better than.
And I can tell you this
and you have to accept it. You know?
I can tell you this from experience as someone who became a gym rep in my life when I was a very small kid growing up, never very muscular. Gym is all about failure. It's about going there and finding where you hit a wall and finding a way to get past that wall. And I've always used that as a creative metaphor because before I went to the gym, I had no discipline and I wasn't a great creator. When I've done this past project where I'm bringing back all my old stories, I threw some stories I wrote 10 years ago away because I'm like, I'm so much of a better writer right now. This is crap. And I took parts of it and made it a new story and played with it because I'm better now. And that's through failing. That's writing, like Randy said. I've written 10,000 pages of stories. That doesn't mean I wrote 10,000 good pages of story. It just means I've written 10,000 pages. That's and you have to understand that. It's a skill. And Meredith, to your point about not having an idea, let me tell you, right now I could go on Facebook and say I want to write a comic book and I don't know, anyone want to do this story? And I'll get 10 people to sign up for it and start negotiating prices for that. There was a time where I couldn't get an artist to work with me to save my life. So, and I was willing to pay. For some reason, I couldn't get it done. I didn't know the right places to go. I was trying. So you know what I did, Meredith? I made a comic book about headlines. I made an entire comic book about newspaper headlines that was for the vigilantes world that we were going to be introduced to in the comic book. So all it was literally just headlines. And I gave it to New York Comic Con, Buddy Scalera, who I'm still friends with. I can't even believe I'm saying this. I'm friends with him still to this day. He saw it and he said, that's a clever idea. Victor Dandridge said, wow, that's great. And it just so happened that when I came up with that idea, they announced Gotham at that New York Comic Con. So it was basically the same idea, talking about the city behind the hero as opposed to actually the hero. So it made me look like I was onto something that was just becoming pop culture now. And it really helped get my career somewhere just because I looked at that dead end and I said, how can I beat this fucking door down? And that's what I did. I found a way to punch through it, just like that Doctor Who episode where he punched the wall 1,000,000 times. For those who get the reference, you get it. But sometimes it takes that. It's the glass ceiling, and it's whatever it is. And I know a lot of people, glass ceiling, you think it's about women being elected. No, it's the idea that you have to keep rising until you break through the ceiling. And that is, that's why they call the comic book industry breaking into comics. And yes, it's very different now than it once was, but it's still breaking in. It's finding your way in. And once you get in, the door closes behind you guys. So it's about running against that wall. So I hope we motivated you, Meredith. And then to what Brandy was talking about, we had another comment from Meredith where she said, I'm hoping to have one of my stories in an anthology. But as a writer, I do respect the process. I want to include the notes of what I envision in my head. Do artists want details like that? I'm not an artist, so I'm going to shut up now. What do you think, Luke?
Yes, absolutely. The more details you can give me about what you see in your head, the easier it's going to be for me to recreate that.
Dave?
I totally agree with Luke. Everything you give me, yeah, as much as possible.
And again, it all depends upon the shorthand that you're going to develop with that artist.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're going to empathically know. And those are the true collaborators. That's why it's a collaboration. To tell them everything in your head might be an overabundance of details to you. To the artist, it's probably an underscoring of details, and they're still going to have questions. That's why you're always going to communicate with the artist while he's working. He or she is working while they are working, so that they can get into your head, understand the story that you're out to tell, in order to tell that story to the best of their ability. But the real key is to do it, and everything's baby steps, one little step at a time. And the more you know about comics, the more you know about sequential art, the better off you're gonna be. And there's so many books, there's so many tutorials out there on YouTube, there's so many people that are out there begging to help you, that there's no real reason to get out there and take an afternoon, take a day, take a couple days, go out through YouTube, buy a couple of books on writing comics, get the good ones. Don't make sure that you're getting the good ones and not the bad ones. Look at other art or other writers that are in comics. How do they write? Well, what are their hit points? How do they structure a story? Start dissecting that comics. And yes, eventually it might even feel like a job after a while. But if you love doing this, you're going to keep doing it. And once you've done it once, like what Meredith was saying, once you get that anthology story out, once that first story comes out and you hold it in your hands, you're going to decide pretty much right there and then if this is going to be your career or if this is what you're going to do. Might not be the way that you pay your bills, but it might become your career and something that you're going to do in one level or another for the rest of your life.
Yeah, there's only one thing I would add to that is that the more time you spend with certain creative team members, the less you have to communicate to them. Like my colorist, I used to tell him like, oh, I want this and like direct everything. And now this last book, issue 5, he'll send something back and I've given him two notes in 24 pages. Like, hey, can you fix this for me? Because I had envisioned this, and it was like, but everything else was spot on. Just because he knows the world I'm drawing now, he knows the world I'm building, and that's what will happen with you, Meredith, as you're working with an artist team. They will just get to know what you want. So when you write it down, they'll get it. They already know.
And Meredith also asked, what about scripts? Is there a specific script format for comics? The short answer is no. There are actually many different variant scripts. There are, of course, the books of how to properly script a comic book. And there's also Superscript, which actually is a good program if you want to use it. It helps you put in your word bubbles and all that. And I use it when it doesn't sign me out and I have to go out and look for my password again. I use that one. But ultimately, it's about what we've been talking about. And you guys can all disagree if you think I'm wrong. It's about the relationship you're fostering. It's about what the artist needs from you as a writer to be inspired. How can you help them? And here's something a lot of people don't do. And I'm looking forward to the day I don't letter my own books anymore, because lettering takes a lot of time. And for my back, it's actually problematic. So I'm probably going to start using letterers in the future. Make a script for a letterer. So few people make a script with a letterer in mind. Believe it or not, there's a separate script you can write just for a letterer, and a separate script that you can write for an artist, which actually tells the artist where to leave the room for the lettering. So few writers actually do that. So they come back with this beautiful piece of art with no room for the bubbles, no room for the script. You have to be clear. Look, top left corner, you can leave blank as hell. There's going to be a word balloon. Look how many words are going in here. Be aware. As opposed to getting that beautiful art, then you having to play with it in Photoshop to shrink it and try to fake a background or something. Don't set yourself up for failure. Think of everyone who's reading the script and why they're reading the script. What do you guys think?
That's why I found when you're working with more than one collaborator, like if you're working with a separate letterer and a separate artist, to sit there and write it out screenplay style. Mm-hmm. Description of the panel, what happens in the panel, and then the dialogue that happens in that panel, in order for everybody to be on board and to get as much of your thought down there on that script as you possibly can, because you're really the writer is really the one that's driving that boat, and the other folks have to make the size of the boat, and then the letterer has to fill in the information for that boat. So it's important for them to have an idea of what, just like what Rob said, how much background you're going to need. Because if you have a long soliloquy that a long set of dialogue that somebody's giving you, you don't want to have a huge background in the back when the artist could save himself an hour and a half by not drawing anything there. And this is where all of this dialogue goes. Boom, right there. Yep. But it's also important. Like I said, there's plenty of books out there that'll instruct you the nuts and bolts on how to do that. The real key is not to trust any of them, and to go out and read them as a technique, as a way, because Marvel works completely different from DC. Every artist, every writer, every artist-writer collaboration is going to tweak that system to make it work for them, to keep it fun, to keep it light, to keep it interesting, to keep themselves challenged. And you really have to be careful with that, and not just follow one book. That's why I encourage you to go out and pick up a bunch of books, pick up some screenplay books, pick up some cinematography books, like what Rob was talking about, so that you know different angles and stuff. But most importantly, read comics like crazy. Read comics like crazy and get to know what works, what you love about it, what you don't love about it. Concentrate on the stuff that you love.
And Dave, how upset are you as an artist when you find out a writer had you do this beautiful piece of art and then puts balloons all over all of your art?
I don't know. I don't really. I guess I don't feel that much because it's just that, it's there. This is whatever you want to create here. Now I did the work pretty much. Now whatever words you put around, I'm like, dang, you put. Hey, whatever. That's you. But that's you. It's not my book. It's like something I worked on. But you know that you the creator. That's your thing. But me, yeah, that's so important. It's been so many times I've done something and be like, oh crap, man, I ain't think about the bubbles. And that's why I make sure I always do thumbnails. I don't do like a quick job. I make sure I do enough that's not fully finished, but enough to say like, okay, well, I want this character here, I want this background here, but the bubbles is going to be right here. Therefore, I can see the conversation bouncing between these characters. They talking about this background, or they talking to each other. So that's really important. I think it's really important to draw thumb lines, pretty much to sketch it out first.
I got a lot to say about lettering, Rob, because I actually letter more pages than I draw, and people all the time. Whatever you do not undervalue the letterer. Okay, the lettering of the book is the second part of telling the story. Essentially, if the artist has done a good job, you can follow where their story is going without the words. But man, you got to have words on there, or it's in some cases that's what moves the emotion. That's what gives you insight to what the characters are thinking. That's the some of the meat of the personalities of the story. And yeah, there are too many times I've been given a script that has a little tiny panel and it's full of art. It's got this big face, and then where do I put the dialogue? Where do I put those things at? Keep that stuff in mind. And the other thing is I've done it to myself too, just like he was saying over there, that one of the things that I run into is that I won't think about how many words is going to be in that panel and what the font size is going to be used. What it's going to look. Now, since I do my own lettering for my books, I know that this panel, it doesn't have enough room for lettering. And so but I know how much space it's going to take because I'm the letterer, but sometimes you don't know what your letterer is going to be working with. And so you get them involved in the process too. If you're running thumbnails, like what Dave does, which I think is a great idea because I do it too. If you're going to run a thumbnail of the layout of the book, and then you might as well say, give it a shot at the letterer. Let him look at the script. Let him look at the script and the thumbnails and say, hey, are we leaving enough room here for you? Where are you going to put this? Because then if the artist knows that, this is going to be full of bubbles, then I don't have to spend hours on the detailed background. I can do something more simplistic, and you can speed up your whole process. The point is to get your entire team communicating and working cohesively together.
And understand this about lettering, and I'll chime in with Luca on this. Just because you can do something different, you want to be different, doesn't mean you should. A couple of the first books I ever did, and I say this all the time, I did in my own unique way. It got to the point where people didn't think I understood how to letter. I was doing something different because I wanted to do it a different way. And to be honest with you, I'm proud of what I did because it taught me how to do things that I now do. But I knew how to actually letter, and I've lettered more things than, like Luke said, you don't know I've lettered it because I didn't stick out. When a letterer has something that goes wrong, that's when you realize, and you go look in the book, who lettered this? When you're doing it right, no one ever knows that you did it. I've been in a lot of anthologies and people, and I pointed out to them, they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that was you. That was actually pretty good. Even with The Advocator, I had done some lettering with certain stories where I had to go in and fix something for someone, and it looks identical to what the letterer were doing. And there's a lot of rules. We just went over this on the show last night. There's a certain font, it's classic comic, where people have this tendency to do comic book and they put caps lock on because they want it all capitalized. not really realizing that when you have cap lock on, it affects the eyes. So a capital I winds up going in the middle of MIA, making it look like MIA instead of Maya. And we went over this last night. Whereas if you didn't have caps locks on, it'll go to that single stick and it'll just look like a regular eye without the tops on it. I don't know what you call those, the lines that make it look like the more adult version of the capital version of I. So there are a lot of rules. And like Randy said, go get, and he says this a lot, go get an education. And don't think that you ever know enough. I still read books. I'm reading how to become a colorist as soon as I get some time, just so I can understand it, I can do it, and then not have to ever do it again if I don't like what I'm doing. I've learned how to flat. And the point is learning the skill lets you be able to talk about it when you notice something that you think can be changed. And understanding it helps you. Like going into the layers, I tell all my artists now to send me layers of their stuff because I want to be able to play in the layer metadata in case I want to make a change somewhere and I want to see it so I can go down all the changes because I studied it. I read about it. I wanted to know everything I could know about comics. I have over 10 years of just reading stuff, so I understood it. And it doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that you're not going to want to try to do something different. We all want to reinvent the fucking wheel. But the problem with reinventing the wheel is most people are going to tell you that wheel over there works just fine. Stay in your lane. So one last point I want to make, and then I'm going to open up to you guys for things that we might have forgotten.
Can I interject something there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Once you understand how the car works, reinventing that wheel gets to be a heck of a lot easier. And you never know when you're going to come up with a system that everybody else is going to sit there and go, oh, that really worked. I think I'm going to do that and the next thing that I do. You know, don't be afraid to try to reinvent the wheel, but know what the wheel does first.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
It's very important to get that experience under your belt. And like I was saying before, once you get those 2,000 pages down and you really know what you're doing, then you figure out how best to tell an incredibly good, smooth story. And that's everything.
And the final, and then to Randy's point, I think you'll like this because it goes perfectly onto what you just said. And this is my final point for this panel. Being humble is so important in creating comics. I cannot tell you how many new people come in and say, I'm going to be a legend. I don't know what I'm going to be. All I know is what I can create. And I'm trying my best to create great comics at my skill level and always trying to make my skill level go higher. You come in trying to act like you're going to be the best thing since sliced bread. By the way, Betty White is older than sliced bread. Little fun point. But if you come in trying to be better than sliced bread, you're going to fail because you're not being humble. Be a humble person. Be open to learn. Be open to hear while you're doing something wrong, and you'll be a better creator for it. Anyone who starts off saying they're going to be the best thing in the world, remember Stan Lee didn't use his real name because he never expected to be who he became. You know, and I can give you a list of creators who are at shows right now who thought they were hot shit, and now all they do is sit at a show because they didn't know how to market, they didn't know how to continue their career and keep it going. So keep that in mind, guys. Be humble. So we have a couple more minutes, a couple comments. Sarah had said, hey, Brian K. Morris, good idea. And Dave just looked like he was slapping Zim because your camera froze at one point. It was actually kind of funny at the time. I think that's it on the comments. Sorry, comments are having problems again. Brian K. Morris says he's proud of his humility. And Brian does show a lot of humility what he does with his show because he's talking about other people more than he talks about himself. So I give him credit for that. But what did I miss, guys? We'll end the program with what advice would you give to a new creator who's trying to go from idea to story? Even if we covered it and you just want to drill it into their head now, I'm going to give each one of you a few minutes to kind of end. And at the end of the advice you give, please tell them how to follow you. You know, that way we can get it up there for them. Oh, and Meredith says to all you guys before we do that, thank you for all the information. This is something I've always wanted to do. Stories come easy. Finding the rest of the team is not. Time to go hunting. And if Meredith, if you need any help, you can reach out to me, Randy,
good luck, Meredith,
and Luke. Any one of us will be happy to help you because that's what we do. Creators help each other rise up. And if
good creators do.
Yeah, good. Well, that's the whole thing. Humble creators do. Bad creators will tell you that you got to pay for everything, and they'll try to sell you something, like space at a Comic-Con that's virtual.
Follow my system.
Whole other gripe I have. Whole other gripe, but we're gonna let we'll go with Dave starting. Dave, tell us what we forgot today and what advice you're giving to new creators watching this, trying to learn where they can find you.
I think we went over a lot of good topics actually, and covered a lot of good things. But my main thing, I can only speak for myself, is it's me, doing my own thing. Really, is to have fun. I mean, that's my main thing for me. It's like have fun, do research, of course, and it's just like just put your energy into it. It's just so many people out here that we can that you collaborate with, that you talk to. I mean, YouTube it, Rob USA. You can YouTube it. I mean, it's a whole bunch of stuff out here of information, good books. Like I said, we went over a lot of stuff, but I really say have fun with it. Get your stuff out there. Don't procrastinate. Just do it.
And where can they find you, Dave?
Oh, you can find me at Dave Supreme. Any social media out there, really. I do commissions. I work on books. Do my own thing right now. And just hit me up anytime you need to. Any information, I feel a holler in the ear. David Spring, hit me up.
Yeah, have fun. I mean, it's only comics, right? Be good to each other. Try your best to make the world a little bit better. Leave the woodpile a little higher than you found it, so to speak. Help one another, lift one another, each other up. I mean, that's we talk about the relationship with the creative team, but there should be a good relationship with all the other creators as well. You're not always going to see eye to eye on everything with people politically or creatively, but that's okay. That's okay. You can still have respect for each other, and again, just have fun. It's comics. There's no point in arguing and hating each other over comics. So think about that. Enjoy it and do it. My name's Luke Stone, obviously, and I am right now running a campaign for Hybrids, the Sons of Gods. We have just a couple days left, and we've got some great tiers over there. So please go over to Kickstarter and look up Hybrids, the Sons of Gods, issues 1 through 5, the complete first arc. So you can look that up, and you can also find me on Twitter at Luke Stone Studio, and you can find me on Facebook at Luke Stone Studios, and you can find me at on the interwebs at lukestonestudios.com. Thank you.
The big key thing here to remember when you're taking your ideas and turning them into comics is that you deserve to be there. You might not tell the best story. You might not tell the most competent story, especially at the start. But the more you do, it's just like using any other muscle or any other tool. The more you do, the better you're going to get. And what you do now isn't what you're gonna do next year or even next month. A lot of times, but you have to do the work. You have to get it out there. You have to do the work. You have to do the research. You have to know comics. You have to know what it's about. The last thing you want to do is spend months working on a book by yourself, do a show, and have somebody go, "Oh, that's exactly like such and such a person." You need to know your market. You need to know what's out there, and you're going to learn your craft as you go along. But the key is to do your craft and do it until you know how to do it. Even if and never feel a secondary. Don't let anybody come up, because I've known people that this has happened to, and it happened to me early on. Don't let anybody tell you you're not good enough. Don't let anybody tell you you're not meant for comics, or you just need to get out of this market altogether. That's just BS. Find your way, make your way, and if you can't make it in the big guys, figure out a way to make it any way that you can. If you want to be in comics, be in comics. But if you want to be in comics, do comics, and do it as to the best of your ability, and your ability will just keep getting better and better the more that you do. And good luck, because there's a desperate need in this. This is a communication art form, and everybody's got their own unique perspective, their own unique opinion, and everybody's story needs to be out there so everybody can read it. So.
And where can they find you?
And you can find me at the Zim Geek channel here on YouTube. That's ZIMMGEEK. On YouTube, there's new content coming. I swear there is. Plus, on Facebook and Twitter and the Indie Volt podcast. Every Tuesday night at 9 p.m., we run for a couple hours with a group of us talking about indie comics. And Thursday morning at 9 a.m., we also talk about comics with coffee. So that's both of those are Eastern Standard Time. So and I love talking comics. Sometimes you can't shut me up.
Now, Laura, we're talking about comics. I have a ton of respect for Randy because he always says get an education, and that's so true for things like this. Thank you all for making that education possible for the people who are now going to watch this video and learn something. You guys are probably going to inspire a new generation of creators, and that's what we're all doing. We're trying to give back because we've been inspired too. I am the underground indie advocating devil, and I've advocated for education today and learning how to do this. There's so much more to learn. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Don't ever think you've ever gotten there, because the minute you think you've gotten to the point where you know it all, someone has already reinvented the wheel. Someone has changed the car because they understood the car. And that's a great thing because it gives us new things that we can try and we can do. So I appreciate you all for being on the panel. I appreciate all you guys for the great questions.
One last point before you go to add on what Rob has said. Don't even trust yourself, because I have found times you build up these walls and these opinions about somebody that's in the field, somebody's work. When I was growing up, I absolutely hated Jack Kirby. I thought he was blocky. I thought he was terrible. The EC guys I thought were too technical and too realistic. And then later on, a couple of years later, you go back and you reread that stuff and you ask yourself why they're there. You know, why is this guy, why is this guy making such a big living and getting so much work? Figure it out. These people are all talented out there, and they have their own unique perspective, and it's not always going to match yours 100%, especially when you first start out, because there's a lot of first assumptions that you can do, and then a few years later you go back and you go, man, this guy or this person, this creator really knew their stuff. They knew what they were doing. Look at how they did this. Look at this leg. This is crazy. You never know what you're going to find. Keep reading, keep rereading, and you'd be surprised at what you're going to pull out. That makes you a better artist. I'm still learning, and any good artist will tell you that they are. They're always still learning.
And never forget the greatest teachers are our fans, because you guys teach us what you want, and we are listening, and we are definitely trying to make some of the best comics that you guys are going to read. I support indie comics and underground comics by extension for that reason. These are fearless creators telling you the stories that they want to tell, not what a corporation told them that they couldn't tell.
Amen to that. Knock on wood.
Yeah, and that's it, guys. Thank you all for being here. This has been brought to you by the OnCon Experience and IndieAdvocates.com. And, of course, thank you to Luke Stone, Randy Zimmerman, and Dave the Supreme for all showing up today and making this one of the best panels that you guys can learn from. Thank you all. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m.
Take care. Stay healthy.